The Library Book, by Susan Orlean. Introduction. It was April 29, 1986. A beautiful, clear morning in Los Angeles. But deep inside the city's historic Central Library, something was wrong. A fire alarm rang, but no one was particularly worried. The old alarm system was prone to fits, like a crotchety old man. Staff and patrons calmly shuffled out into the sunshine, expecting to be back at their desks in a few minutes. But this was no false alarm. Deep within the concrete bookstacks, a strange and terrible fire was being born. It wasn't the usual red and orange flame you might imagine. This fire was different. It was almost colorless. So hot it appeared icy blue, like looking into the heart of a forge. Firefighters who entered the building later said they felt like they were staring into the bowels of hell. The fire reached temperatures of 2,500 degrees. It achieved a state so perfect, so rare, that most firefighters go their entire careers without ever seeing it. It's called a stoichiometric condition, the perfect ratio of fuel to oxygen, creating total, flawless combustion. It burned for over 7 hours. It destroyed nearly 500,000 books and damaged 700,000 more. It was the single greatest loss to any public library in the history of the United States. And as the smoke cleared, 2 questions hung in the air. How did this happen? And who would do such a thing? The search for an answer would lead investigators to a strange and captivating suspect, a handsome, charming, blonde-haired aspiring actor named Harry Peake. A man who loved to tell stories, maybe a little too much. Today, we're diving into Susan Orlean's masterful work, The Library Book. This isn't just a book about a fire, and it isn't just a true crime story. It's a profound exploration of something we think we know, but rarely ever see: the public library. It's a love letter to the power of stories, a detective story about a forgotten tragedy, and a moving reflection on the very nature of memory itself. By the end of our time together, you will understand not just what happened on that terrible day in 1986, but you will see every library you ever walk into in a new light. You'll see them not as quiet, dusty buildings, but as living, breathing hearts of our communities, places where we can, for a moment, glimpse immortality. Let's begin. Book summary. The story of the Los Angeles Central Library fire is really 3 stories, woven together like a braid. There's the story of the fire itself, a terrifying, almost living character. There's the story of the man accused of starting it, Harry Peake. And then there's the story of the library itself, a life story stretching back over a century, filled with heroes, villains, and eccentrics. To understand the tragedy of the fire, you have to understand the life of the place it tried to destroy. Let's start with the man. Harry Omer Peake was, by all accounts, a character. Born in 1959, he grew up in a flat, monotonous suburb of Los Angeles, and he longed to stand out. He was handsome, dimpled, charming, and funny. He had a swoop of very, very blonde hair that seemed to have a life of its own. He also had a gift for invention. His own sister called him the biggest bullshitter in the world. He was a storyteller, a yarn spinner, and an agile liar, constantly fancying up the facts of his plain life to make it seem more glamorous. Almost predictably, Harry decided he was going to be an actor. After high school and a stint in the army, he moved to Hollywood. He didn't say if he became a movie star, he always said when. He'd tell his family about all the roles he was getting on shows like General Hospital and in movies with big stars. The truth is, there's no record of him ever appearing on screen, except for one time, on the local news in 1987, after he was arrested for setting the Los Angeles Central Library on fire. This is where Harry's story crashes into the libraries. On the morning of April 29, 1986, the fire began in the fiction section. It started small, a thin thread of smoke curling along a shelf of books. But the library, designed long before modern fire safety, was a perfect tinderbox. The bookstacks were essentially 7-story concrete chimneys, with open metal grating for shelves that allowed air and fire to circulate perfectly. The smoke turned from pale white to gray, then to a thick, oily black. Suddenly, sharp fingers of flame shot through the smoke. At 451 degrees Fahrenheit, the books began to smolder. Their covers burst like popcorn. Pages flared, blackened, and then sprang away from their bindings, a storm of sooty scraps soaring on the updraft. The fire consumed the fiction section, then the cookbooks. It climbed the 7 tiers of the stacks, hit the concrete ceiling, and mushroomed back down. It found a catwalk and raced across to the northwest stacks, where it devoured the entire U.S. patent collection, 5.5 million listings dating back to 1799, all gone. The heat became unimaginable. Steel shelves glowed cherry red, then twisted and slumped like melting wax, pitching their books into the inferno. The firefighters who rushed in found themselves in a nightmare. Their thickest hoses couldn't make the tight turns in the narrow stairways. The water from smaller hoses sizzled and evaporated before it could even touch the flames. They were fighting a fire that was not just burning books, it was burning with a kind of theoretical perfection. A colorless, transparent, impossibly hot fire. One fire captain said he felt like he was standing inside a blacksmith's forge. "We thought we were looking at the bowels of hell," he recalled. Outside, the library staff and patrons watched in horror. Some were crying. The air filled with a syrupy smell of burning microfilm and what one librarian called the smell of heartbreak and ashes. This fire was a catastrophe. But for the rest of the world, it was barely a footnote. That very same week, news broke of a nuclear accident at a power plant in the Soviet Union, Chernobyl. As the world held its breath, waiting to see if we were about to witness the end of everything, the biggest library fire in American history was completely overshadowed. The books burned while we were all looking the other way. In the aftermath, what was lost was staggering. All of Shakespeare. All American and British plays. All biographies of subjects H through K. 90,000 science books. A first edition of the Fanny Farmer Cookbook from 1896. A volume of Don Quixote from 1860. The entire collection of 12,000 cookbooks, including 6 books of popcorn recipes. In total, 400,000 books were utterly destroyed. Another 700,000 were badly damaged by smoke and the millions of gallons of water used to fight the fire. The loss was equal to the entire collection of 15 typical branch libraries. And almost immediately, investigators believed it was no accident. The word arson began to circulate. Most library fires are, in fact, incendiary, meaning they are set by people. Investigators released a composite sketch of a suspect, a thin-faced man in his 20s with blue eyes, a light mustache, and an abundance of blonde hair. This brings us back to Harry Peake. A month after the fire, a woman named Melissa Kim called the arson tip line. She said her brother's roommate looked just like the man in the sketch. The roommate's name was Harry Peake. She also said that Harry had been telling people he was at the library fire. He'd even told one friend that he'd started it. When investigators brought Harry in for questioning, he began to spin a web of stories so tangled it was impossible to find the truth. First, he said he was downtown and tried to go into the library, but a guard told him it was closed. A few hours later, he called the investigator back and said he'd misspoken. He had never been inside the library in his life. Then, under oath, he said he was downtown sightseeing, smelled smoke, and saw the fire trucks. Then he changed his story again. And again. In one version, he was a hero. He was inside the library when the fire started, and it got so hot that a handsome fireman had to carry him out. To other friends, he bragged that he had set the fire. He'd toss it off as a joke, a bit of bravado. His friends knew he was a storyteller, so they didn't know what to believe. As one told investigators, he doesn't know the difference between fabrication and truth. The case against him was a ghost. There was no physical evidence. The only thing investigators had were Harry's own words, and his words changed with the wind. He was given a polygraph test, and he failed it spectacularly. The examiner said he'd rarely seen a chart so indicative of deception. Finally, after months of surveillance and interviews, 6 of the 8 library employees who saw a suspicious man that day picked Harry's driver's license photo out of a lineup. In 1987, Harry Peake was arrested. But the district attorney, facing a case built on hearsay and a suspect who was a compulsive liar, felt he couldn't get a conviction. The charges were dropped. Harry walked out of jail, grinning for the cameras, looking for all the world like a man who had gotten away with something. But the story doesn't end there. Harry, in a move of pure, baffling audacity, decided to sue the city for false arrest, demanding $15 million. The city, led by a sharp attorney named Victoria Cheney, responded by suing him back for the full cost of the library's damages. The case moved from criminal to civil court, where the burden of proof is lower. As the legal battle dragged on, Harry Peake's life took a tragic turn. His health began to fail. The handsome, vibrant young man started to look shrunken and frail. In 1993, just 7 years after the fire, and only months before the rebuilt library was set to reopen, Harry Peake died of complications from AIDS. He was only 33 years old. He went to his grave without ever admitting he set the fire, but also without ever being cleared of it. The truth, whatever it was, died with him. Did he do it? Susan Orlean leaves the question open, suspended forever. Maybe he did it in a moment of pique after a security guard turned him away. Maybe he did it for the attention he so desperately craved. Or maybe, just maybe, he was simply a tragic, foolish man who told one tall tale too many and got caught in a story far bigger and more terrible than any he could have invented. The fire and the mystery of Harry Peake form the dramatic heart of this book, but the soul of the book is the library itself. Orlean takes us on a journey through its entire life, and in doing so, reveals that a library is so much more than a building that holds books. The Los Angeles Public Library began, as many things in the West did, with a scrappy, ambitious spirit. Its first home in the 1870s was a few rented rooms in the Downey Block, a building that also hosted a weekly slave labor auction for Native Americans. Its first books included practical titles like Hints to Horsekeepers and On the Sheep Industry. From these humble beginnings, it was shaped by a succession of unforgettable characters. For decades, the library was run by a line of formidable women, long before that was common. There was Mary Foy, who became head librarian at just 18 years old in 1880, so young her father had to walk her home from work each day. Then came Tessa Kelso, a brilliant and unconventional journalist who modernized the library but was forced to resign after a scandal erupted because she purchased a racy French novel. Then, in 1905, came the Great Library War. The board decided it was time for a man to run the library and fired the competent Mary Jones to hire one of the most eccentric figures in Los Angeles history, Charles Fletcher Loomis. Loomis was a poet, an adventurer, a historian, and a genius of self-promotion. To take his first job in Los Angeles, he walked, literally walked, from Ohio to California, writing newspaper columns about his tramp along the way. He wore a green corduroy suit, a red sash, and kept his hair long. He was a force of nature. He branded the library's books with a hot iron, declaring, "We brand cows, don't we? Are our reference books less valuable? He started a club for iconoclastic librarians called the Bibliosmiles, whose official beverage was apricot brandy. Loomis was a chaotic, brilliant, and deeply flawed leader who dragged the library into the modern age. It was under his successor, the steady and serious Everett Perry, that the library finally found its permanent home. After decades of being shuffled from one rented space to another, the city finally approved funding for a new, grand building. The architect chosen was Bertram Goodhue, a genius who was tired of historical styles and wanted to create something entirely new. The building he designed was a fantasy of right angles, terraces, and carvings, crowned with a tiled pyramid topped with a hand holding a flame, the light of learning. Goodhue assembled a team of artists and scholars to weave a story into the very stone of the building. He called it a storybook building come true. Tragically, Goodhue died of a heart attack just before construction began, but his team carried on his vision. When the Central Library opened in 1926, it was a masterpiece, a proclamation that this young, sprawling city on the edge of the continent had a soul. This is the building that burned in 1986. And the story of its rebirth is as remarkable as the story of its destruction. After the fire, the city was heartbroken. But that heartbreak quickly turned into action. The morning after the fire was extinguished, thousands of volunteers showed up unprompted, ready to help. They formed a human chain, passing the smoky, waterlogged books hand over hand out of the ruined building. For 3 days, they worked around the clock. It was as if, Orlean writes, the people of Los Angeles formed a living library, a system to protect and pass along shared knowledge. The 700,000 damaged books presented a huge problem. If they weren't dealt with quickly, mold would set in within 48 hours, rendering them unsalvageable. The solution was extraordinary. The books were packed into thousands of boxes and taken in refrigerated trucks to commercial food freezers, where they were stored at 70 degrees below zero, nestled on racks between frozen shrimp and broccoli florets. It was the largest book drying project ever attempted. Aerospace engineers from McDonnell Douglas even used their massive space simulation vacuum chambers, the same ones used to test satellites, to sublimate the ice out of the frozen books. While the books were being saved, a massive fundraising campaign called Save the Books was launched. The head of the oil company Arco, whose skyscraper stood across from the library, kicked it off with a $500,000 donation. School kids held can drives. Ray Bradbury judged an essay contest on what the library means to me. The campaign culminated in a 24-hour telethon that raised over $2 million. The entire city, from corporate executives to schoolchildren, rallied to bring their library back to life. It took 7 years. The old Goodhue building was meticulously restored, and a massive new wing was built alongside it, tripling the library's size. On October 3, 1993, the Los Angeles Central Library reopened, bigger and better than ever. In the final part of her book, Orlean returns to the library of today, exploring it not as a historical artifact, but as a living, breathing organism. This is where her personal journey reconnects with the larger story. Her love for libraries began as a child, on weekly trips with her mother. Those visits were dreamy, frictionless interludes that promised I would leave richer than I arrived. For years, she fell away from libraries, preferring to buy her own books. But a school project for her son brought her back to her local branch, and the thunderbolt of recognition struck her. The sounds, the smells, the gentle, steady busyness, it was all the same. She writes, "In the library, time is dammed up, not just stopped but saved. It is where we can glimpse immortality. In the library, we can live forever." She shows us the hidden machinery of this immortal place. We go down to the shipping department in the basement before dawn, where 32,000 books are moved around the city's 73 branches every single day, like a bloodstream of knowledge. We meet the librarians in the Info Now department, who answer a relentless stream of phone calls from the public, questions ranging from "What's a cabana boy?" to "Which is more evil, grasshoppers or crickets?" And most movingly, we see how the library has become something much more than a place for books. It has become a de facto community center, a university for the people, and a sanctuary for the city's most vulnerable. Orlean takes us to the computer center, where many of the city's homeless population spend their days, connecting with family, applying for jobs, or just finding a safe, quiet place to be. The library offers literacy programs, citizenship classes, tax help, and even workshops on healthy relationships for teenagers. It is a place that welcomes everyone, and charges nothing for that embrace. Orlean discovers that a library isn't just a place that contains the past, it is constantly building the future. It is a testament to our stubborn belief in the persistence of memory. This idea becomes deeply personal for her. As she was writing the book, her own mother was succumbing to dementia, her personal library of memories burning down day by day. Writing the book became an act of defiance against forgetting, a way to save those precious memories of their trips to the library together. In Senegal, she tells us, the polite expression for saying someone has died is to say his or her library has burned. Each of us is a private library of a life lived. When we die, that library is lost forever. But, she concludes, if you can take something from that internal collection and share it, on a page, or in a story told, it takes on a life of its own. It endures. That is what a library does. And that is why, in an age of endless information, it matters more than ever. Commentary. Reading the library book is a powerful experience, because it takes something so familiar, so seemingly simple, and reveals its profound and complex soul. Susan Orlean reminds us that a library is not a passive building. It is an active, dynamic force in our world. It is a declaration of hope in the face of chaos. The story of the fire is, of course, the dramatic engine of the book. It's a real-life thriller. But the ultimate power of the book doesn't come from finding out whether Harry Peake was guilty. It comes from realizing what was truly at stake. When that fire raged, it wasn't just paper and glue that was burning. It was our collective memory. It was the physical manifestation of all the stories, all the knowledge, all the human effort that we have decided is worth saving. And that, I think, is the most important lesson from this book. In our digital age, it's easy to think that everything is saved, that nothing can truly be lost. We have the cloud, we have servers, we have the internet. But Orlean makes a beautiful and compelling case for the physical, for the tangible, for the real. She talks about the magic of wandering through the shelves, of stumbling upon a book you never knew existed, of seeing how ideas are neighbors on a shelf. An algorithm can give you what you're looking for, but a library can give you what you didn't even know you were looking for. It gives you the gift of serendipity. The book is also a powerful reminder of what a true public space is. In a world that is increasingly commercialized, privatized, and divided, the public library stands as one of the last truly democratic institutions. It is a place where you are not a customer, you are a citizen. It doesn't care how much money you have, what you look like, or what you believe. It asks only that you are curious. It offers its treasures freely to anyone who walks through the door. It is a sanctuary for the mind, and as Orlean shows us so movingly, it has also become a sanctuary for the body and soul for so many people in our society who have nowhere else to go. So, what can we take from this? How can we apply the wisdom of this book to our own lives? I think it comes down to one simple, powerful action. Go to your library. And I don't just mean go to check out a book. Go and experience it. Walk through the doors and just be there for a while. Notice the people. Notice the quiet hum of activity. Notice the bulletin board with its flyers for local events. Notice the librarians helping a child find a book, or an elderly person use a computer, or a student research a paper. See it not as a relic of the past, but as a vital, thriving part of your present. Because what Susan Orlean shows us so beautifully is that a library is a mirror of our community. It reflects our hopes, our questions, our struggles, and our dreams. By supporting our libraries, we are not just saving books. We are saving a piece of ourselves. We are investing in the idea that knowledge, stories, and shared memory are the foundations of a humane and civilized society. We are placing a bet on the future. That was a summary of the library book by Susan Orlean. We've touched on the major themes and stories today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a photograph of a magnificent meal. You can see what it's made of, you can admire its presentation, but you can't taste it. The real flavor, the real nourishment, comes from experiencing the book for yourself. It's in Orlean's beautiful sentences, in the deep dives into the lives of these incredible characters, and in the quiet, reflective moments that make you pause and think. This summary is your invitation to the feast. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up a copy. It's more than just a book about a library, it's an unforgettable journey into the heart of why stories matter. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to continue exploring these incredible books together, and it ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing work from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and keep growing together.